Well, thank you for coming. I think it's just about time to start. I know Adele said she'll be coming, so she often comes a little late.
A bit late, yeah.
And if anyone comes in and I don't see it, let me know. What were you gonna say now, Jane? This book.
Well, and not everybody did like it. But I really like the book, but there are a lot of people that, or not a lot. One, The Power of One. There was one person that didn't like it, who shall remain nameless.
But even if you don't like it, that's the reason to come, to see, to see what other and to voice your, because I can't really say I thought it was great either, but it was definitely a thought-provoking. That's the thing, thought-provoking. Yeah.
Yep, definitely, I agree. It was thought-provoking and not fun. The last book was more fun, but then we also had criticism of that one because it wasn't heavy enough, I guess. I don't know. So,
Arlen, I think she's talking about you, right, Arlen?
Yep.
Hardly anyone here today. Very low in the numbers. So.
Oh, here come a couple more.
And I met a person who wants to join us.
Oh,
Yes, I'm Carolyn Brown.
Glad you were able to make it.
Yeah, well, I'm one of these people that I start having like second and third thoughts, did I really hear it was today or is it really tomorrow?
Well, our numbers are pretty down, but we do have some people who are heading south or in other places joining us on
See, we
Zoom.
have a Carolyn. We do, is that spelled right?
Yes.
We even had a.
Where should I sit?
Anywhere you'd like.
Okay.
I can't imagine there's a name that's not in that box by now. That
Yeah,
box has been around for a
We
long
just added a couple new ones today also.
Ruth is coming.
Okay, should we wait for her to come then?
She's in the elevator, sure.
Oh, I'm glad Ruth is coming. I was
Closer,
looking
so
forward
we're-
to her input today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could. Are you now, do you need this space?
No, I
Okay.
spread them out a little bit, but I think it's okay. I'm the one required to wear a mask. You are not.
Well, then I will just do this. I
I
started.
wear a
here.
mask because we hope to see grandkids this weekend.
Yeah, you're always in that state. It seems like you're
And
lucky.
I never say no when they say, can you read?
Of course.
Actually, Sunday, parents were at a bike race and we had the kids for 3 hours at
Oh,
the zoo,
nice.
Oh, nice.
outdoors. only.
Adele, why don't you move a little bit closer?
Please.
You are
Yes.
such a faint little person where you are there. Try to
Well,
move a little closer.
Yeah, wait.
I'd like to keep some distance. Where are you?
We can't see down the table.
Yeah. We
Okay.
Zoom people are just right there,
I'll go here.
but then the people in person are just like tiny little bugs.
Yeah.
Well,
That's what you get.
We want to see you.
We know what you look like. We know.
Oh, I know, believe me.
breakthroughs happen. Yeah, but
Adele's daughter-in-law's a doctor, so she always has rigid rules.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Let me tell you, I don't want to cross the daughter-in-law.
I know that feeling.
Always a bad
And
idea.
actually, her is very welcome. Her loving care and gentle reminders are nice.
She used to wear a mask every day, all day, doesn't she?
Yes, she works in a hospital in Boston.
And we have to here. We're required to.
Oh,
Working
really?
here. Yeah,
Oh, no kidding.
the library board has decided that employees have.
And I applaud that.
Well, let's get started. I just,
help.
yeah, are you?
Move over one, so I'm next to you. Okay, you want to come over here? How can I help you do this?
Except the standing up, wait, I may need to.
I wear a mask when I go into the grocery or,
Yeah.
Let me help you.
but here I figure if
can I
we're
best
sort of
help you?
distancing,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're
I
fine.
feel
here.
safe.
You made it.
I was watching do you ever watch 60 Minutes?
Now you need to release the
Sometimes.
lock.
They did
Yeah.
I think they're doing all reruns now because of the football games. But there was one where this group of architects have gotten together and they went to,
Unless you didn't want to sit there.
No, I do. I want to
Sudan,
visit
maybe?
with you before you go.
and they started building buildings for the people. And what they did is they had 3 criteria, and one of them was you had to have build buildings that had good internal circulation. You know, and natural, not air conditioning, no HVACs, nothing. And it was and then you had to employ people to build them that lived there. They had that, and I've forgotten what the third thing was, but it's working great and it's starting to spread. And I was thinking, well, geez, we could have benefited from that here.
They did put UV filtration in the county buildings.
Oh, they
I don't
did.
know how good that, how much it helps, but they did do that.
I think
too.
it all helps.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah, our
Oh,
church in
great.
Florida, which has a big campus and a huge parish hall and lots of activities, has put air purification system in. That's the state of the art.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe we could clean up the air.
Yeah. That would help. Well, thank you all for coming and welcome to the new member here, Carolyn. And I just want to say something quickly. York County Reads is being planned right now and the books will be given out. There will be 2 books. So just to let you know, when the books are given away for free, look to the list of programs and decide which of the 2 books you want according to which book groups you're going to.
Oh, just 2 books. Okay, can you say that one more time?
When the programs come out, look to see which of the book discussions, there's a lot of them you want to go to. And then when you pick up a free book, choose the book that's appropriate for the one you want to go to.
So are you saying
you
there's going to
can-
be 2 series of discussions?
Yes,
And
and you can, of course, choose anything from the library catalog also. So just a tip. I wanted to read, I wanted to say this book confused me. I think all of us are confused about, is it a memoir or is it a novel, fiction? Of course, he on purpose adds that subtitle, a novel. And I did have to go and look up his parents online to find out more about his parents, because I kept thinking, if this is really a memoir hidden as a novel, would that upset the parents? So I just want to say, before we start, I want to say, I have 2 articles here you might want to read over. One is when his father passed away, and they have different names from the parents in the books. For some reason, he uses his own name, but he uses alternative names for other people. Here's the story about his father and what a great, important heart doctor he was in Milwaukee, and he was really training hundreds and hundreds of doctors in this revolutionary technique. So it really commends him. And if anyone's interested, here it is. His father's name was Masoud, and they do mention Ayed in the article. And then the other one I came across was a book or a kind of a author blog. And the lady who writes the blog is an author herself. Let's see, where did I put it? And I looked her up, and here's a book that she's written for all of you online. It's pretty interesting. It's called Threading My Prayer Rug. She's written a newer one, but this is the one we have here. One Woman's Journey from Pakistani Muslim to American Muslim. And it's kind of fun to see all the pictures of the Pakistani wedding, her wedding, and her kids. So you might want to read this over. She has a new one about people being friends across cultures. But she writes in her blog when Ayad Akhtar apparently wrote a column in the New York Times in the regular column called Modern Love. And he talks about his mother telling him that she had been in love with someone else. She just gets really upset with him because she said, "I knew your mother. Ayad, I do wish you luck on your new book, but did you have to write this piece?" And then she writes, "I wish you hadn't. I think your mom in prayers, may her soul rest in peace." So this is the other one where the author thinks that Ayad should not have written all of these private things about his mother. Of course, then we go to the book, and the book, is it real or not? Her real name was something different from the character in the book. So what does everyone else think? I have one quote from him. Should I read that quickly before we get started? There's an interview where in bookreporter.com where he's asked, how would you respond specifically to those who will read Homeland Elegies as disguised autobiography? And he answers, I will be happy. The book plays with reality and illusion and is an attempt to find a texture that reflects the confusion around fact and fiction that has overtaken our societies. To read it simply as veiled autobiography would ultimately be to miss the point, but the experience of missing the point and then wondering, well, that would be the larger point. So I think that's where I fit in, wondering. And I just want to add one more thing as a librarian. I've been paying attention to James Herriot and the series of books that he wrote, and his real name was not James Herriot. His real name was John James Alfred White. And the characters in the book all have in real life different names and slightly different, they did different jobs. So why is that book cataloged in nonfiction and this book in fiction?
Interesting.
Did you come across the term autofiction when you were reading reviews and things? They kept calling it autofiction, like that's the new term for fictional autobiographies. And I guess they're quite popular right now.
It seems to be in, I talked to the catalogers here in the library and one pointed out that in some cases when they write autobiographies as nonfiction, they get in trouble when some of the facts are disputed. So maybe it's the best
I kept
way
running
to
into that
do it.
term. I had to look it up to make sure that I knew what it was. But that's
So
what
it's
they
called
were calling it autofiction. And that's a new term.
Okay, I'll look that one up too. So what does everyone else think? I'm sitting
Okay.
a little confused.
I
think-
I'm thinking, I read the book long enough ago.
Okay, Barbara and Jane, who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
Nobody.
Okay, Jane.
Well, I'll go. I'm probably louder than Barbara. Barbara is so soft-spoken, but I am not. No, interesting. I read the book long enough ago that I printed out a kind of a summary of the book from the internet. Okay, and it's from Book Rags, which I often do. Well, in there's a couple of sentences that are interesting. It says the novel is narrated in the first person by Ayad Akhtar, the author's fictional avatar for himself. Okay. I thought, well, now avatar, I've heard that word, but boy, what does it mean? So I had to look it up. And there's several meanings, but it can be an embodiment or personification as of a principle, or it can be a graphical image that represents a person. So I don't know. So his use of his name as an avatar, doesn't that sound kind of like, I don't know what that means exactly, but anyway, that was an interesting point for me, because I too was very confused about whether he was really the narrator or if this was his real family. It sure sounded like his family from the other book that we read, but anyway. Okay, Barbara.
I was just going to say that one of the reviewers, when I was looking up reviews of the book, said that that was the only way he could get it published, was to call it a novel.
Oh,
As if he called it a memoir, they would not publish it.
that's really interesting.
Because of the topic, or?
Because of the material contained within, it was not the United
Well-
States.
Well, plus he said it was all made up. So why would he try to get it published as a memoir when he said it was all made up?
That's what he said.
Yeah, he said it was all made up.
Get
It
it
wasn't true.
But whether, that's
So
the
maybe
question.
if he told the publisher that it was all made up, they couldn't publish it as a memoir.
But
Do we
why
know
did he,
whether
but
his
using his
father-
own name? That's the odd part of it.
Yeah,
We know that his father was a prominent Milwaukee physician. That's
Mhm.
Yes.
recorded at various
Mhm.
spots. But do we know whether he really actually treated Donald Trump and whether he was Trumpian, so Trumpian in his views.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't find anything
I
about that.
couldn't find any evidence of that. I thought that was added.
Someone asked
Yeah.
him and he wouldn't answer.
Yeah, see,
Oh.
that's what, it's all, you can't
made
believe anything in there because except for the fact that he had a father that was a Milwaukee physician, he comes right out and says it's all made up. So you can't trust anything, and he doesn't want you to believe any of it as a truth.
The true story.
He wants it to stand as a novel.
I think he's sort of making a comment on society and misinformation that is so
Mhm.
prevalent these days also. In the book, of course, his father goes back to Pakistan, a ruined man. But that's not what happened to the father according to this
And then
story.
he sued for malpractice and
Yeah,
the whole thing.
so it doesn't sound like that's the path his real father took in the same way.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know.
Well, did everybody get upset by that, by the fact that it was you didn't know whether things were true or not true? Did that upset everyone?
No. Did he go, did his real father actually go back to Pakistan?
No,
It sounds like.
Oh, he didn't.
I really do. With using some of his father's attributes to develop that character.
Well, it's a fiction, maybe a fictionalized account of a true story.
Yeah.
and he also states in one of the interviews that he's a drama writer, so he goes for conflict, tries to make everything more difficult for us. And you can certainly see that. He sure lays it all out there, doesn't he? But
It's not us that should be upset. I think it should be his family that's upset because we accept it as a piece of fiction, but they have to be going, wait a minute.
Well, his father's dead.
his father
Well,
and mother.
that's true. And yes, but still.
And
Well,
in
and
the
I-
article, his father died in May of 2019, I think, and the book came out September 2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
A year later.
Right. Well,
And then in the book, he has this half sister
Yes, I wondered about that. Yeah.
with a very American name. I forget what it is now.
Caroline. No. Yeah,
Well,
Caroline is the mistress.
Yeah.
And the half
I can't
sister.
remember. He learns
know what
about that half sister in kind of strange way,
what do you guys
accidental way.
say, Ruth?
I think one of the major reasons, or not the major reason that he wrote this book was to respond to the people who have said very firmly when they go to his plays that they think the plays are autobiographical, that when he puts something up on the stage, that everything there is something that has happened to Akhtar himself in his life, and that his characters are reflections of his family and of his own life, including when he went to New York and became successful and was living in that kind of an apartment that he shows in his plays. And he was trying to tell people, don't take this as autobiographical.
That may be a good point.
It's from my experiences to a certain point, or from those of the people that I know and associate with, or my family. I lifted this little bit from my mother, from something she said once, and I lifted this little bit from there, but it doesn't mean that the plays are autobiographies. So he's trying perhaps to say the same thing with his book. It looks like an autobiography, but it isn't. It's very complex.
Yeah.
But he has a very complex mind.
Are his plays in the library system at all? I was
yes,
thinking I'd like to
sure.
read one.
His famous one was Disgraced, which won him the Pulitzer Prize. And of course, we did his book American Dervish for Door County Reads a few years ago. So
Yeah.
at that time we added what we could, what was out there. So I'm sure you can. But it's always this conflict of a Muslim in the American culture.
Mhm.
situation, and we see that again, of course. I think it's interesting that he starts the book telling about how he took the classes with Mary, what was her name? And that's apparently symbolic, that name too.
Ah,
Mary Maroney, and then how he
Mary
would write his
Magdalene.
dreams.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Moroni, but apparently it's a Mormon symbol. Does anyone else know about it?
Is it the angel?
Yeah.
Melanie?
What do you know
That's
about
on
it?
top of, well,
Just,
that brought the message evidently of to create the Mormon faith.
yeah. And that's a direct symbol that he borrowed for her name. I heard that in one interview.
Okay.
So, but I think that he was right. He was just what Ruth was saying. He was telling us this is a craft that he's working hard at. The way he describes how he learned to write in the beginning, which I thought was pretty interesting. So these questions are from the publisher. You may not have them at home, but the first one we kind of talked about already. The narrator has his name, and does this affect your experience in reading the novel? Well, it did, you know, Adele says she didn't make a difference.
it was fiction to me.
Yeah, to me, I kept wondering back and forth, back and forth. And that's why I looked up his parents to see what I could find. So it did affect me. And I thought it, you know, it achieved exactly what he wanted, which was confusion, kind of confusion. Anyone else have opinions on that?
Well, it said, I don't know, since it said on the cover, a novel,
Yeah,
just from the very beginning, I just thought, okay, this is fiction but there's so much fiction is that we recognize as really good fiction. It has a lot of messages, you know, and that's more the point, that's more what he was trying to do than to say, this is my life story. I think he was trying to talk about, maybe in a larger sense, he was, you know, his is the Muslim American experience, but I think he was maybe trying to talk about all immigrant experiences in the United States. And
Yes. I want to add to that because I also grew up in an immigrant family, and I had similar issues to what is being described here with his father. At the time of the Nixon and the Watergate era, my father, who had become a citizen and voting, thought Nixon was exactly what the country needed to save it from the difficulties that he saw the American culture was in. And I was a generation below him, and my brothers and I tried very hard to say, well, look, Dad, he's had this cover up, he's had all these things. So be it, he's still the savior. And the dialogue was so similar when he's talking to his father about Trump. And when I was talking to my dad in the 70s, I could have written that chapter because we went through the same thing. And finally, when the most heinous act came, and I don't remember what it was, it may have been the tapes being, I think it was his use of swear words. That was something, that was a no-no. That was the robberies and the cover-up that, go figure. He finally apologized to us and said, you know, you were right. You understood it better than I did. So
interesting, yeah.
I lived that section.
Well, was that a cultural conflict or a generational conflict, do you think?
Probably both.
Yeah.
He also got upset when I was protesting the Vietnam War. He thought, what do you mean you're going out there with those hoodlums and marching up and down the street? He didn't think that was appropriate behavior for his daughter. And had he been able to stop me, which he couldn't, he would have done so.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm about as waspy as a wasp can get. And my parents, my mom was just sort of like, she kept her political beliefs to herself and never engaged in any of this, which was so smart, you know, but my dad was like your dad, it's like, this behavior is terrible and you should always support your government when it comes to war. And
yeah.
he's right. I mean, Nixon's right.
You don't have all the facts. How can you stand up and say these things when you don't know what he goes into his decisions?
Right. Oh, definitely. But the thing to me is I was a political science major at the time in college, and I would say, Dad, you got to look at who he's running against. I mean, isn't that how you kind of have to look at the big picture here, and and you have to decide for yourself, does character matter, which we've had to ask ourselves many times in recent history. And my dad wasn't a deep thinker like that. He was a World War II vet, and he was like, my country, right or wrong. And, that's the way it is. And he's too young. I mean, I also taught when I became a high school teacher in my 40s, and they gave me political science and American history to teach. So I was going through, year after year, I was going through the American history, and, this my country, right or wrong thing. Aren't we past? I mean, we are the people, we are responsible for the government that we put in place. No question about it. But our country's been wrong.
Yeah, and once we put them in place, we have to give them a chance to function.
Right.
That was something he did. Okay, he's been elected, give him some time to solve the problems. Well, he dug his hole, Nixon, in the case of Nixon, the hole got deeper and deeper that he was digging.
Right.
And finally it got too deep.
Well, and can't you, in a way, this whole thing about Americans not, our current dilemma of like this sort of, I don't know how else to think of it, but sort of like this underbelly of America that I didn't know existed until the election of 2016, kind of rose up. And when I look back on when did Americans stop trusting government to the extent that they would vote for a TV reality host as president of the United States as president?
I think it began in the 70s.
It probably began.
Or maybe with the Vietnam War.
With the Vietnam War. I really kind of think because they lied. That was the thing about the Pentagon Papers, remember all of that? They lied and lied again. Like you said, the hole kept getting deeper and deeper. And then the fellow that stole all the documents, he was
Ellsberg.
Daniel Ellsberg.
He sold the Pentagon Papers, but who was it that did Iran-Contra?
Oh.
You know what I'm talking?
North, that one?
Who?
Oliver North?
Yes, Oliver North. And so he's given full immunity by Congress. If you'll come and testify, you can have full immunity. Go make sense with that about that. And then, then he gives Fawn Hall, remember her, all the papers to stick out in her underwear. I mean, and you're trying to, and I'm looking back on all of this now. And I was thinking about that as I've only had a chance to read a couple chapters of this, but I was looking back on it and I was thinking, there's plenty of blame to go around, but in the end, the other reason I brought this, I don't know, does anybody else read Louise Penny?
Yeah.
Besides me? Well, this is her
Very
late,
popular.
yeah, she's a astonishingly good writer. And in here, the main character is the chief of police. He kind of, as the series goes on, he goes back to being head of homicide for Quebec to head of the whole police force, and then back to gets demoted for saving the country, basically. But in here, he said, she says, let's see, she says, You should. It's about what happens when gullibility and fear meet greed and power. And nothing good, said Armand. You're smarter than you look, Stephen tapped the cover. People will believe anything. That doesn't make them stupid, just desperate. And I thought, wow, well, if that's the case, how come I can't see it? I mean, how come I can't see the desperation of the Muslim Americans? And that's why I read stuff like this. I'm hoping that I can learn to understand. I mean, if he's going to say, yeah, I was kind of glad when the planes hit the World Trade Center. I'm like, no wonder they made him call it a novel. I mean, because otherwise he's going to be another Salman Rushdie. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Really? I give the immigrants to this country a lot more credit than that. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Well, wasn't that The Remarkable Fundamentalist? Isn't that the book that we read long ago?
Oh, okay.
That
About
really did
5
that.
years ago, yes.
Yeah, did he really say that in this book, though? I don't remember.
Then he was happy, no, he said he knew immediately what happened, who had done it.
He was walking around kind of dazed, I
Yeah,
think, wasn't
And
he?
that's when he puts the cross
And then he
on
was wearing a cross.
to protect himself. You probably haven't gotten to that
I
yet.
haven't gotten to that. No, I read some reviews and in there, he knew people that were Muslim Americans that kind of grudgingly admitted that they were kind of happy. He said, why? He said, because we won.
But what I'm trying to say is the immigrant experience that the father had and my father's, you embrace the country so wholeheartedly, at least initially, that you can find nothing wrong with it. And in that sense, my dad, Bill Schuler, was this man to a T. And I enjoyed reading those chapters. I saw my dad.
And I think that's a lot of the point of the book is that Ayad himself was born here.
Yes.
And-
And you can look at it with a different eyes.
In his last line,
As
I
my-
am an American.
Yeah, as my brothers and I did, we looked at it from not only a generation lower, but also having come through the American education system and maybe learned to distinguish a little bit that my dad had not had, nor had this gentleman. I liked the book on the whole. There were a couple of chapters that there's a little bit too much sex in there for me.
Yeah.
I
why
thought
do
that
you
was
think
boring.
there was so much of
yeah.
that?
That was a good question.
Did you think that those chapters were like put in as afterthought or contrived? Or, I mean, if the whole thing is somewhat believable and you're questioning whether these things really happen, those parts to me seemed totally contrived and I didn't believe it at all. I thought, really? And
I thought so too.
I thought so too.
I thought maybe it was added to sell the book.
Right.
I think
Yes, yes. I have a
my
friend who's an
theory-
author who says that if you don't put that in your book, the editor's after you to put it in your book, that's what sells books. And she objects because her books are, not that it really didn't happen. But she said, everybody tells you, you have to do that. You have to put it in. And that's the first thing I thought of. His publisher said, you have to put this in or your books will not sell.
I kind
That's
of
what-
have a different theory. And that throughout the whole book, he's trying to present Muslims as real people, not the sort of image that we have. They're not supposed to drink. And
Right.
here's the father. All of them are drinking all the time except a few. And they're not supposed to, according to their religion, So you have that type of thing, plus the mixed marriages that were sort of arranged are very common. And so there's a conflict of that. And just presenting Muslims as real people who behave in a pretty rough way much of the time. That was my theory. I mean, the whole idea that women should be covered and everything in some of the countries is part of that,
What did you think about the sex scenes?
Yeah.
The sex scenes?
Yeah, do you think that was added and necessary? Did it promote the plot?
I didn't care for the sex scene stuff at all. I think that could have been handled very differently. It's almost as if he was trying to make you dislike his character.
Yeah, so we're
He
all,
thought about that. He
all
thought
sort
about
of felt it was contrived or forced, right?
that.
What do you
Didn't
think?
advance the plot
Well,
at all.
I felt I had to read far too much about his syphilitic lesions than I needed to know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
he could have made his point without being quite so specific.
Right.
One or two times would have been enough.
Oh, yes. I thought, I mean, I wasn't slamming the book shut because of it, but I just thought that it was too much information.
And I was wondering, is it because I'm 80 years old? Or is it because I'm looking at it as a literary piece? And I'd like to think it was because I'm looking at it as a literary effort that for me fell a little flat in those chapters.
And I was also
Very
wondering
flat.
if it's generational too.
That's-
Is
yeah.
this what these millennials or whatever generation he is are supposed to do?
I hope not.
Is this what they try to do?
Oh,
I mean, I
man,
look at some of
it's-
these kids today, singers, and I just don't get it. But is it because
They're
I'm,
singing about it.
no, but the way they, like, what's that girl? I keep arguing with my son about that one. I can't think of her name now, but they look so lost and sad. They're role models for that generation. So was this a generational behavior in the book? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, I taught for 22 years, high school, political science and US history. And when we were studying, part of the curriculum was to teach tort law, okay? So I would put it to the kids. Woman drives through the McDonald's drive-through, right? And she's handed a cup of scalding water or coffee. It spills on her, she gets third-degree burns. She sues for them, serving too hot coffee, and she wins. Now, and she wins millions, right? Am I remembering this right? So I said, when I first started teaching, and so I'd say, now, who agrees with this and who disagrees with this? So, a lot of the students disagreed with that. And then I'd say, well, let me put this to you a little bit differently. Your parents put you in charge of watching your brother or sister, younger brother or sister, and you go into McDonald's, go inside. Odd concept now, but you go inside and you're standing at the counter and you've ordered a hot coffee. And while you're paying or not paying attention, your younger sibling reaches up and grabs the coffee and it spills all over them and their whole face has third-degree burns. What do you think then? When I started teaching that story, that hypothetical changed everything. Oh, no, then McDonald's was in the wrong, and so then that would lead into a conversation about what's the role of government. And what's the role, because you're talking about tort law, how do you decide who's right and who's wrong? By the time I left to a student, that story did not change their mind. It's still that woman did not deserve a dime.
Wow.
She was, she took her chances going through, it's up to her. It's not up to the government, it's up to her. And I was like, I'm sure this means something to myself. I'm sure this means something. I'm just not sure what it is, and that's the place he's coming from. I mean,
That what,
that people don't have compassion for other people. I mean, I kind of got that out of this book. Am I wrong? Like I said, I didn't finish it.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. I mean, there's so many characters who are like that. What's his name? The rich guy?
Yeah, his
Riaz.
friend.
The one he invests his money with and becomes,
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
it's like he's giving us a cast of characters in all walks of life, many walks of life. And there's not a lot of kindness in any of it. Right?
Right.
It's a pretty harsh world.
Well, right, he goes into capital, he's not a fan of untethered capitalism, I would say. I don't think, as far as I could tell. But it was just one of those things that I encountered over years to watch the change. And also the interestingly enough, the demographics of my classroom changed because I taught in a far western suburb of Chicago. And when I started there, it was 90% white, children of white blue collar workers. They worked on the line at UPS, or they worked at making Microsoft chips, or, something like that. And by the time I left, it was about 90%, maybe 80% Hispanic.
Wow.
And one of the
That's a big
things,
change.
yeah, it was a big change. And it was a big change in views. Now I think if you had asked, it was just a big change. I had a friend who was also a teacher there, and she taught social studies, and she would just ask kids, how many of you are here illegally? And they'd raise their hand. And I'm like, Sandy, that's just against the law. You can't ask them that. But now that I've made my point, what are they,
Yeah.
why? Why are they admitting it? And
And what about the mother in this book who didn't want to stay here at all, who yearned for going home?
And she had she was not her first choice to marry Mazoo, or whatever his name was in the book.
Lycander, the father.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the heart surgeon, right?
she had also another doctor, I think, another person in medical school.
Yeah. Was that Latif? Was that the
A
one?
classmate of her husband's, I think,
Latif,
or a classmate of hers.
Yes, a colleague of her husband's, Latif, was that his name?
Latif, there's
Yeah.
one, I wrote the name. Was that it? Latif, the boy,
That's
the one she really liked?
Yes.
Yes, that was
Back in
his name.
Pakistan. But she seemed unhappy the whole time. And
Was
yeah.
was she a doctor?
Yes.
She was a doctor herself who was not practicing, is that correct?
No, I think she was practicing too, some of the
Oh, she
time.
was, okay.
Here in the States?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Now,
She worked at Freighter, I believe.
but in the fictional mother, in the book's mother was, she was not practicing, I don't think.
Oh,
No, I don't
I had
think
the
she
impression
was.
she was staying at home with
with the kids.
with her two children. I listened to this some time ago, so it's a little.
Yeah, I thought
She
she
had a
was, but
brother.
maybe I just didn't pick up on
But
that.
the actual mother was practicing at Freighter, yes.
Yeah,
but in the book,
Yeah, and
No.
it was nothing to do with heart. It was
no,
a different
the
specialist.
father was a heart,
Yeah,
yeah, she was something else. But still, it's interesting that one girl, what was her name? Asha, that he
Yes,
loved.
Mhm.
She ends up getting married and going back to Pakistan, right? Didn't
Yes.
she?
Yes, yes.
And pretty traditional life.
and a traditional marriage.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah. How does all that sort of thing work in this country, do you think? With the sort of planned marriages and everything, you wonder how that works in our culture.
You mean for them when they're living here,
Yeah,
for the Muslim community?
in general, yeah.
Mhm. If I could take us perhaps in a different direction, but not really, I guess. So the name of the book, Homeland Elegies. So when I looked up the definition of elegy, it means grief for one who is dead. So then I'm thinking, okay, what is the author trying to say? What homeland, which homeland or which lifestyle is dead? Is it the father's? Is it the one that the author, the supposed main character in his book, has adopted and he's rejecting it? I thought that was an interesting way of looking at the
Yeah.
title.
it is.
So there.
And was it the father Elegy, was it Elegy of the Father's View of Pakistan?
It could have been any of them. It could have been the father's, the mother's, his own, the
I have very
author.
limited knowledge of Pakistan, visitations every summer or so, I guess they went.
Yeah. He didn't seem to like, I mean, he liked visiting, but he didn't want to live there himself.
True.
He didn't like the food, if I remember right.
Are we talking about the author or
No,
his avatar?
Avatar, I love that word.
The narrator, shall we say.
The narrator, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this list of questions given by the publisher, they specify at the bottom that they're calling Akhtar the author and Ayad is the character.
Okay.
They had to write that on the list of questions.
Because to me, this book, while it was about politics and religion and culture, to me, it was more about family and your relationship with, and Adele, you both mentioned about your relationship with your father. And, it could have been the same whether you were an immigrant or not, maybe, but that, yes, we had generations, differences, how family, I think that to me was the main theme to me in the book was his relationship with his father and what all that was. Anyway.
And I thought the ending of the book was so powerful. How, his father really had such a devastating, the gambling issues and then the trial. But, the author or the narrator or whatever stuck by his dad and was there. And, even though that family had some major problems through the years, boy, when it came to the end and things needed to be done, he was there for his dad. And I thought that was pretty impressive. I really liked that part. I thought that, there's certainly goodness in that son.
Well, he had the money to do it too at that point, right?
Well, yes.
And the option have leisure time because he was his own boss, so to speak. He didn't have to ask for time off or paid family leave to go and do this caregiving.
So did he?
But he
live
could
the American
he
dream?
could have just been so disgusted, which would be the logical
Yeah.
feeling that you would have for your father, just
But he had to
disgust.
pull his
But
dad
he
out of jail.
stuck with him. I
I
thought that was
remember
pretty good.
when his father was in jail, he had to go to his buddy to
Yeah,
get him out. And then the arguments they had.
I thought that Buddy was one of the nicest guys.
He was
too,
a
because
hero.
I was ready for him to be, mean and,
He could have been.
but he seemed to be kind and considerate, which was surprising.
I think it speaks to the
friendship.
Ayad, I'm going to use his character, had a high school relationship that was enduring enough that now 15 or 20 years later, he still felt the connection and an ability to give this gentleman a call. And the gentleman responded in a very loving and positive way. That surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, that was one of the nicest parts of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
What else?
here they're saying he opens and closes a novel in the same setting, the college campus. Why did he do this?
It's a very American thing.
Yes.
It's quite clear that this Mary had an enormous influence on him.
Yeah, he keeps going back to her. That's why I think, I said in the beginning, I think the beginning where he's talking about how he learned to write and the whole thing of keeping records of his dreams was trying to set us up for the fact that this is a novel, not an autobiography.
And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker.
And isn't the title,
That was never anything but a novel.
Right.
isn't
I
the
mean,
title
like
of that
I didn't-
last, nope, I'm sorry. Isn't the title of that last part called free speech? I think that's what I wrote down. So maybe he's justifying the fact that I can say what I want. It's free speech. I can make all this, you were mentioning the last part like that.
Yeah.
Yes. I can be that way. I can do that.
Yeah, and I
Yes,
think
right.
that he could probably not have written those plays or this book in Pakistan.
Well, no.
Wasn't there some mention of that, just like
Yeah,
Yeah.
Solomon Rushdie, being in that situation or
he
something?
also
Can't
could
go.
only
over-
write from London or wherever he is.
Yeah,
And when you think about the current Nobel Prize winner, he could only, I forget if he's from Madagascar, I think, or he's from some African. He could not have be writing what he's writing except from England
mhm.
or maybe another Western country.
Country.
And some of these countries are changing, dramatically these days, just like here, we're changing too,
Exactly.
and becoming more restrictive.
So Ruth tells me you have been to all of his plays.
Oh, you read my mind. I was just going to ask because I thought maybe I dreamed that Ruth had said she'd been to his plays. Yeah, what do you have to
Said you
say
had
about
been to
that?
Most of them, they've been performed in Milwaukee at the Milwaukee Rep.
The Milwaukee Rep, in fact, commissioned some of his plays
Oh,
because he was a Milwaukee native, and
I think he was on the board too, or something like that. I read somewhere.
and there wasn't just the one that won the Pulitzer. There were several that won various other awards for plays. I would recommend, if you can't see one, certainly if you have a chance to see one, even with a small regional or local theater, go to it, because the dialogue is so intelligent. I look for that in a play, is intelligent dialogue. And then afterwards, I'm really frustrated because I can't remember it. So I look for the script. And quite often you can get it through the public library, but it doesn't cost very much to buy a script. And if you think it's worth it, you go online and you look for, I can't remember right now, but there's a playwrights cooperative group, and they handle the selling of the script. And they're small, they're no bigger than this. And so maybe it's in the teens now, but it used to be less than that. And it's worth it to buy the script. And then you can read it and reread it. And if you get a chance to see it, you can read it before you go. I prefer to read it afterwards, because then you visualize the actors and the stage business that you just saw. And you can read it and it's all living in your mind again.
Well, for everybody that finished it and everything, do you think from reading this, does he see himself as an American?
I think so.
Yes,
yes, yes.
he ends by saying, America is my country or something like that.
Yes, I'm an American.
America is my home.
America is my home, yes.
And his speeches are almost always something along the line of the torn loyalties and how do you know what you really are and what you really believe. And one of the lines that caused a big fuss for him, and he mentions it in here, is when he has one of his characters at a very sophisticated New York dinner party with their friends after the towers say, I felt a little frisson of pride. I couldn't help it.
Mhm.
And that just blew his ship out of the water, I tell you.
Oh, he doesn't agree that he too felt a little pride. I mean, I'm just asking.
Yeah, oh, that's right. One of the reasons
Isn't
he
that one
wrote
of the
this
books,
book was
though?
to say,
A place.
I didn't necessarily, although he's not ruling it out.
It's not clear. It's sort of, he hints at it and then backs away.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but you can't make the assumption that I didn't feel that,
Mhm.
but at the same time, you can't make the assumption that I did.
He does acknowledge that it was wrong, that these acts took place, but he also doesn't say, maybe.
And I don't remember if it's in that play or another one where his primary male character hits his wife. And they have an argument after something, and he just cuts loose and hits her, knocks her. I remember going, when I saw it.
Yeah.
He knocks her down behind the sofa and she gets up with blood streaming from her nose. And this is a very urbane, sophisticated, loving couple,
Mhm.
apparently. And that character who is his avatar, hits her.
Does anybody in this group have personal experiences at all with Pakistani Americans or?
I do. I mentioned this several times. I work with asylum seekers at a mission in before COVID here in South Texas. And so I've met quite a few people, quite a few Muslims and quite a few Pakistanis. And the thing that I always come away with, and I try to impart this to people who ask me about it, is they're just people. They're just like us. You know, you can't, there's nothing different about the way they function. You know, we're all human beings. So, you know, it doesn't matter what, it makes me think of, there's a reason that everybody has a God at the top of their religion. And yes, the little incidental parts might be different, but really they're all basically the same.
Yeah.
People
Well,
are
some
people.
of the countries are more rigid than others. I'll say that.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, there's different manifestations, but when you, it's just like one of my cousins who is works with the Russians in that air, I forget what the sky project or something, and whenever I ask him about the Russians, you know, especially with all the controversy over the last 4 years about the Russians trying to hack everything, and he says, well, you know, yes, that there is that element, but person to person, it's so different. You know, the diplomacy, of course, there wasn't much in the last 4 years, but he said the professionals that are getting together and making the diplomacy are just people. He says you can't. Yes, you don't like some people. You don't like you don't like people that live on your block. They're just all people. That's what he said. And they have long relationships because diplomats usually are in it for life. And so everybody knows everybody. And you have to remember that they're just people out there most people out there trying to do the best for the world. Not, you know, not, yes, there are the dictators and.
Yeah, the governments are the ones that are.
Yes. But the diplomats behind the scenes, the ones that keep the country running when, you know, politicians come and go, but the people that are behind them, the people that don't come and go, the professionals, he says they're just people. And it's hard to remember that when you see all these races, different things especially the border things that they really get me, when people are afraid of armies on the other side of the border, armed, you know, all these people that are supposedly armed and waiting to get us. You know, it's just, then you see all these throngs of people that have just come over, and they're just people trying to make a better life for themselves and for their children, mostly their children. So,
Well, the mother did grow up in the book, did grow up in a pretty rough situation.
yes.
And that conflict between Pakistan and India has been pretty
Yes.
horrendous at times.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It still is.
It's,
Still is,
It's
yeah.
even into the third generation now, or. About 5 years ago, my brother had a lung transplant in Texas. The entire surgical team, even down to the scrub nurses, were all Pakistani.
wow.
Even the people he was in the hospital about 3 weeks following that, people who brought him his meals and everything, the whole cohort was Pakistani. And I got to know some of them. They were lovely, and I'm grateful for their skill because they saved my brother's life. He would have died. No question. He was very unwell. So I was thinking, this guy's a heart specialist.
Mhm.
They also are
Mhm.
transplant specialists, at least in Texas.
Well, people think that the immigrants that are coming into the country are all street people. That's the idea I get when people speak against them. They think that they're street people, or they're just people coming to take our jobs, or and nothing could be further from the truth. Many of them are educated. Many are gay, and they're very artistic, because gay people are not accepted in those cultures. So they're the ones that the parents are trying to get out and get over here, because we are more accepting
That's interesting.
of gay people. So I see all these young men who are gay, and they've all have scars and burns and all these horrible things, that they've been tortured because of
I never thought of
the
that.
way they are. But that doesn't mean they're street people. They're educated. They have to have money somewhere. Their whole family has gotten together all their money to give to just one or two of their family, usually a young person, because they think, well, we've led our lives. Let's give these kids a chance. They give them all their money to get across the border.
And get them well educated.
And a lot of the immigrants from other countries like Pakistan are educated, or they wouldn't be allowed in,
That's right.
you know.
That's the only ticket in.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah, they don't arrive penniless. They had to have money to get here.
Mhm.
They might be penniless now, but at the beginning,
Well, his father was, and his father, the book father, had all the same foibles that many Americans have. He succumbed to the gambling and the drinking. We all know people in Door County to whom that has occurred.
Mhm.
That wasn't an immigrant phenomenon, I'm sure. It was a human.
Oh, true. Family generation.
Well, the nationalism aspect of having to, talk about the experience of an immigrant, it's nationalism in a microcosm, like my country's better than your country. It's better to be, the Chinese are, that's the thing. One of the things that started blowing me away was, I'm like, seriously? The Asians are feeling like they're being persecuted, and in some instances they are, I'm not saying that's not true, but I gotta tell you, the teachers that were assigned to teach the advanced placement classes, if an Asian walked through their door on the first day, they did everything but a huge jig. It was like, yes, 5, you're going to get a 5, you're going to score big, you're going to be a winner. And I'm going to, because that's how they judge teachers, and forget it if you've got the, if they've given you the ones that arrived reading at the 4th grade level, you don't care, the thing is that for so long, and it's true of our generation, I think, especially with Japan, that the Asians were superior. That the Americans are lazy, and the Japanese are energetic and smarter than us and all that. And then, all of a sudden this, and I'm thinking, when did it start happening that we started lumping everybody together? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Stereotyping.
stereotyping, yeah. And if you're gay, you're artistic, hire a gay guy. If you want a great looking home, hire an interior decorator that's
Well,
gay.
many cultures do have, rules of behavior. And that's what I think the book is trying to do, is give us a different impression of
Yep.
Muslims.
Good thing our book next month is Interior Chinatown. If anybody's read it, they'll see that this is furthers the
I haven't read it yet.
conversation.
I haven't either.
It-
Furthers the conversation.
I agree with you.
Well, there's a world, I think the world's getting smaller faster and faster and faster with all the technology and the satellites. And hi in Texas,
Yeah.
that the smaller and the faster we get smaller, the better off, the more we're going to need people who are good at conflict resolution. Because we have all these underlying ideas, that might not, being an American Presbyterian, I might have trouble understanding a Pakistani Muslim or a Chinese, Buddhist. Yeah. But I know that my nephew went over to India to help. He's a water engineer. He's got his master's degree in water engineering. And he went with a group of India to help bring clean water to a remote village. Okay, so he gets sick and gets put in the hospital. And, my brother calls me and, oh no, Steve's sick in India. I meant, well, here, let me look up the next, plane that's leaving from, nonstop Chicago, India, because your son's sick in India. And he said, well, I shoot skeet with a Pakistani doctor. And his brother is a doctor in India, in this hospital that they put Steve in. And he's called his brother and said, will you go look in on Steve Brown and see, we could get an unvarnished view and make sure he's getting good care. So I'm waiting on that, waiting to hear back. So the next day he calls me, and the Indian doctor, the one practicing there, had gone in, checked on my nephew. No, he's been properly diagnosed. He's getting the proper treatment. It's a high-end hospital, so you don't have to worry about that. The doctors are very, very good here. I'm thinking, wow, I'm learning a lot just by my nephew getting sick in India. That's like, and so my brother didn't go. He talked to my nephew on the phone, talked to the doctor here, the doctor there. And I thought, God, it's such a small world. What are the odds? That
they'd know someone,
that he would know someone who would know a doctor over there. And then I started going down this rabbit hole in my head. I don't know if anybody else does this, but I'm like, okay, here we go again. This is the difference between being like upper middle class and being lower middle class or poor.
This is a case of privilege.
It's the privilege. My brother was shooting skeet at his country club, and the guy next to him shooting skeet is a Pakistani doctor. It's like, they don't, I never run into them in the dollar store. I never do. So I'm wondering what's going to happen. What are our grandchildren? What's the world going to look like to them? Is there going to be a bunch of blending going on, like even bigger than before? Are more countries going to become like the United States?
I don't think so. I think it's the opposite.
Really?
There's a nationalism on the rise
But
everywhere. I think Americans are so narrow-minded about other countries. We just don't get enough civics, and we don't get enough geography.
Right, you're right about that.
Like the Iraq War was an example. Or the bombing, a lot of people had no clue about all those different countries and who was responsible for what. And even now we don't.
A lot of people don't know where Afghanistan is.
Right. And my husband's from Turkey, so I always ask him, and there's a very distinct difference in all the different cultures, ethnic groups. And I'll always ask him, which is which, who's this? Because he understands the differences, and I try to, but I don't really. And most of us don't.
No, I don't think most of us do.
They're all Muslim. A lot of the Middle East is Muslim, but they're not the same because culture.
They're
makes
different
a huge difference.
Groups within
Yeah, very, very different.
sects, sort of like different Protestant sects within the United States.
My nephew, another nephew, you're gonna hear a lot of nephew stories, but did his year abroad study in Istanbul. So of course, you can't pass up the opportunity to go someplace like Istanbul, right? Good excuse. So I'm taking a cab in from the airport, and all these huge container ships are lined up at the entrance to the Bosporus, you know? So I'm asking the cab driver, why is, that's weird. That's like, what's going on? Why, what's the holdup? Why can't they just go, unless they're gonna park sideways like we've seen recently, but why can't they just go through? And he goes, well, they can't go through without a Turkish pilot. That's the rule. And so they're just waiting for a Turkish pilot. And I thought to myself, when I've been watching all the news stories about Los Angeles and New York, I wonder if they could get any tips from just asking the Turks, does this run really smooth? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you have a system now? I mean, can we do that? Can we just start saying, okay, we're going to put a pilot on each one of those ships hanging around out there, and we're going to give you a number and you're going to guide them through, you know what I mean? Like, because they figured it out. And we haven't had this problem before. So why not rely on the Turks? But I guess that would not be.
Right now, we don't have good relations with Turkey.
Well, no, well,
There's some
Erdogan.
huge problems, but
We
should probably go back to the book.
Yeah.
Over time now, but,
Well, aren't they Muslim? I mean, isn't Turkey mostly Muslim?
yeah.
So what did everybody think of when he purchased or actually stole the cross to re-identify himself in New York City after 9/11?
Well,
Does anybody have a reaction to that?
I think that like a lot of people have little Buddhas as symbols of, peaceful.
But
Zen.
he did it
And
to
he did it-
hide his faith.
Well, I don't blame him though.
No,
No, I don't blame him either.
Yeah. It must be scary. I mean, he had enough trouble with that car thing,
Yeah.
although that might not be because of his religion, but more that they were scamming people who are outsiders.
Yeah.
In Germany.
He's trying to survive.
Yeah.
Does that bring, well, see,
And the girlfriend criticized him for that.
right?
Yeah, the girlfriend.
The
did.
one who went back to Pakistan.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh. I was just thinking about World War II and all those that decided to keep wearing the yarmulke, and all those decided, no, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to become more Christian. And I've never really made any judgments on my own, but I think I probably would have changed my name and like this guy did, just for survival. I mean, pretty much. So, I mean, that's sort of been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Out of necessity. It's too bad.
Well, I guess we should probably wrap it up because we're over an hour and we usually run an hour.
What is the name of the book for next month? I have to get a copy of it.
Interior Chinatown, I think is it.
Yep.
Interior China, is that the title?
Yeah.
Yes.
It has good reviews. I think it has a kind of positive. I don't know if anyone's read it
Yes,
yet.
I have.
It's it's a little confusing when you're first getting started. Bear with me.
Oh, no, not confusing again.
Let's go back to reading about horses in Paris.
Yes.
Yes.
By the way, here's a book, if anyone wants to check it out, Wisconsin Luminaries, Literary Luminaries, and I had Akhtar up there with Laura Ingalls Wilder
Oh, my.
Oh, really?
and Aldo
There's
Leopold. Yeah.
I'm gonna take off. Everybody have a great holiday. See you in December.
Neighbor, when are you coming back?
I have to come back next week, but I'm only gonna be there for a couple of weeks because I have to do some family stuff, house stuff, but then I'm coming back down here again after Thanksgiving. So
What
yeah,
all
I
did
will see you, Adele, walking on the road in next week.
Yeah, I want to ask you, what all did you do to the exterior of your house? It looks so
Yeah,
different.
that's what I gotta go check on.
Oh.
They sandblasted the whole thing and restained it. We have to go look at it.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. I hope so. I can't
I'm gonna
tell.
test. I walked past it yesterday afternoon.
Well, I'll see you next week
Love the
then.
purple house.
All
Laura,
right, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Take care. Have a great
I'm
holiday.
gonna head off too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you, Jane.